is retiring.
Who's leaving?
Mike Shaw, our public works director.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We are live and on hotline.
All right, Anton, beware, they're recording now. All right.
All right, so we'll call the meeting to order with a quorum present in the room and virtually. Welcome all. Jamie had sent around an agenda and the minutes from last month's meeting. That was on April 27th. And would entertain a motion to enter those into the record. We have a motion and a second, and any discussion. I thought they accurately reflected the meeting. It's always nice to have a recording of it to go back and verify. So thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Do we have to take a formal
We
vote?
need a roll call, yep. So I will start with those on Zoom. Deb McDonough,
Yes.
Ron Allen,
Approve.
Anton Boder, Ernie Milner.
What are we?
We're
Here
approving minutes.
or?
We're
Yes.
approving minutes.
Okay.
Where am I?
Yeah. Yes,
Thank
approved.
you. Rick Monkeen,
Yes.
David Kirstein.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Jamie put together an agenda. I have to leave at 45, but I think we can cover most of the old business by that point. And April is online. Welcome, April, who can fill in with a little bit of what we covered prior to this meeting. But at any rate, is there any additional agenda items that members wish to discuss or get in our dialogue this morning, if possible? All right, seeing none, I think we'll move forward with old business, Jamie.
Sure, so we'll jump in with utility scale solar. In the packet, there was a red line version of the ordinance as revised based on our discussion from last meeting. If it would be helpful, I can put that up on the screen. I have asked, oh wait, am I still sharing? Can you guys see? Oh wait, this might be the issue. Hey, there you are. Sorry, it's hard to control the meeting and see you all as well. So let me fix this so that the people in the room can see everybody on the screen. So we looked at the language from Augusta's ordinance last month, and there was some consensus among the group that it could be modified for Scarborough. And so that is what is included in your packet. I did have Jay Chase, our planning director, take a look at it. He did make some modifications. And I have asked that this item go on the ordinance committee's June meeting agenda. I haven't heard if that is, I haven't officially heard that it's going to be on the agenda, but I have heard kind of people allude to that fact. So I do need to follow up on that. But we can open up the discussion if folks have thoughts or want to see modifications, or if you're good with it. Let's chat.
Well, can I start?
Go ahead.
It puts a lot of emphasis on the planning board to oversee this change. And so, you know, when someone requests or puts forward a request to develop a utility scale solar system, they would have to submit to the planning board an overarching plan. Is that the process?
Yes.
And then, so the planning board, as part of this ordinance now, would look at the number of trees and and disposition of the forest and then approve or disapprove the plan based on something dealing with trees. I don't know, have they ever looked at that? Do they have any expertise in that area? Is that, is the planning board prepared, ready, and do they accept this responsibility?
I don't know if they have a say in accepting the responsibilities. If it's in the ordinance, they have to comply with the ordinances that are there. This becomes part of a site plan. Anytime a utility scale solar, or for that matter, any land development has to be brought to the planning board regardless. And there is expertise. I don't know, in terms of down the road in the future, what it looks like, but buffering is part of land site plan review, and it's always seemed to be a fairly robust conversation. I think what I'm reading in here, the planning board is more or less going to take a look at the site and ensure that the layout of the solar will be in the best possible way so that you would minimize the need to do mature tree cutting if that's at all possible. And again, I think it goes back to, this is land that is owned by somebody that wishes to do something with their land. And I think this gives enough of oversight that the conversation comes up. And I think that's the important part. It comes up in a site plan review, and then members of the planning board with the applicant can discuss what specific about that project would be concerning when it comes to land clearing and erosion control. Erosion control is normal oversight on anything, vernal pools, wetlands, those kind of things. So it's just adding in forested areas. When a site plan comes, it actually is part of a development which would go through a site analysis and inventory. So at that time, if there is forested areas, the planning board can go to the applicant and say, we want an inventory of the mature trees in that site, and they have to provide that. So I think this gives enough oversight, yet allows for those landowners that wish to work with a company that wants to put in a utility scale solar system in place and ready to go.
And I'll add to that, just in terms of review of projects, planning staff, including our planners and our town engineer, also review all of these plans and provide comments back to the planning board for things that they might want to pay special attention to or to consider. And they may be doing some of the analysis on the forested areas and things like that, and providing additional information.
They have a lot more back and forth with the applicant than the planning board does, because the planning board hears and then responds, doesn't really go back and forth kind of thing with the applicant like the town planners can do when the applicant is putting in a site plan review package. So there's a lot more freedom to talk about it and say, listen, you can't do that, and that's not gonna fly, and those kind of things.
So, I think I wasn't happy with the fact that we have overhead power lines in the downs. You come in to the downs and they took out the trees and they put in power lines along the road. And that's just not, I don't think that's a traditional way of building new
Well, that is
sites like.
traditional way.
Well,
Do
maybe
have
traditional, old, maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, but, the neighborhood I live in, it's all underground. And I
That's
think,
because the ordinance says it has to be in developments like that, it has to go underground.
but why did they do it why did they make the exception then for the downs? And that was the planning board. So I don't know that the planning board uses, necessarily, criteria for making some of these decisions that I would agree with. And
Well,
So
it's
I worry about them.
It's a give and take, yeah. I agree with you on the power lines, but that's not really what we're talking about here.
I
So I'd
just
rather not.
think it
get into
speaks,
any
I think it just speaks to their
off-bar,
decision making.
off-sidebar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is frustrating to see power lines going up in today's world. But let me tell you, it's restricted. Any comments on, I think the proposed language makes it clear and provides a little more flexibility than what we had before. But yet it doesn't just let anybody come in clear cut. So I'm in favor of moving forward with this to the ordinance. Welcome.
Hi, is this the sustainability?
Yes, it is.
It is.
That's it.
Absolutely. Welcome. And your name?
My name is Will.
Well,
Sorry.
Will,
Yes.
last name, I think we have to put it in the records.
Chabot, Chabot.
And you're town resident?
Yes, I live in Scarborough, over on Holmes Road.
Holmes girl, yeah. Did you come up Broad Turn?
From here, yes.
Took a while, didn't it?
Yeah, sorry, it's still early.
Anybody else from the committee want to weigh in on their thoughts about the additional language for this ordinance?
I think it's a good modification, balances the needs of the landowner and the environment.
And Deb has her hand up.
Okay, Deb?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask to follow up on what we were talking about before. When the planning board is providing an exception or suggesting an exception, what's the process for community involvement? Like, are there hearings and things? I don't pay attention. But it's something we might want to put on our
When they
schedule.
come up in the planning board, they're open to public comment, and these aren't really considered exceptions. They can apply for applicants can provide for a waiver for just about anything.
Okay,
And I think this lays out, I mean, it doesn't just put everything on the planning. I think the language here, if an applicant wants to move forward, reading this, they have to understand there's restrictions already in place about clear cutting. I'm using the word clear cutting. But I don't see where, these are going to be things that are exceptions. The language says that clear cutting is discouraged, and, vegetation and main erosion, sediment control is mandatory, and herbicide is prohibited. I don't think those are kind of things that are waivable. It says it right there. So I think the big deal is if you have a little bit of land here, open space, and you have forested areas in between, do those need to be cut in order for the array to get in place? That's up to the applicant to demonstrate the need to cut those down. And if the applicant can't satisfy to the planning board's satisfaction that those trees have to come down, planning board can refuse it. That's the way I read it.
So Rick, you feel at this point that this ordinance, the way it's written, will be responsive to the comments of those two gentlemen from our last meeting when they were talking about trees and whatnot?
Yeah, I do.
You feel this solves their problem?
Yeah.
Okay.
And yet it allows the town of Scarborough to have a little bit of oversight in it. And I think that's what the town needs, and the applicant needs to step up and prove that they're following the ordinance.
And just one thing that we did add that wasn't discussed at the last meeting was a revegetation plan for when the arrays are decommissioned. So if they went into a forested area, and they remove the trees to put in the array in the first place. When they're decommissioned and the array is removed, there needs to be a plan to revegetate that, the area that was disturbed, as closely as was there prior, or when the array was installed.
I thought we had that when they were decommissioned.
Yeah. it's-
Well, there was there was,
Stabilization and revegetation.
yeah, but now they need to have, they definitely need to have a reforestation plan in there as well.
Okay, so
The bottom
the
of
plan
section
is what's
3.
different.
Yeah,
They need to have a plan at the time of application.
correct.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, there's a new paragraph in there under C.
Yeah,
Yep, so
I see that now.
any
Sorry.
sites where more than an acre is disturbed, they need to
Yep.
have a revegetation plan during the application process and as part of their surety, when the site is decommissioned. Deb, is that a new hand up?
It is. Is there any mechanism for oversight of decommissioning? Like, is there any way that the town would even know if a site had been decommissioned?
Yeah, there are triggers in there, through code enforcement, they're required to let us know, when the site is being decommissioned.
I'm sorry to extend this, because,
No, go ahead.
I think the language is good. All just concerns about the planning board. I just don't know enough about how, the makeup of it or how it functions. Are they all volunteers like us?
Yeah,
So there's no paid positions?
No.
And so they're appointed by the council? I mean, can I speak bluntly? I think I always do, but, if they were at.
And then there's one juror.
I mean, if they were to run amok, if people disagreed with the way the town was changing, like you just did, there was widespread, concern about the way the character and makeup of the town was heading. And it was the planning board was behind a lot of those decisions. What recourse would citizens have, voters have? They have to, how would you oppose something that the planning board approved if you were against it?
My reaction to the planning board is that they have certain latitude to make certain decisions, but basically they run the ordinances provide guardrails.
This is an awful lot of flexibility, though. Yeah, I don't know. There's no, quantifiable metrics associated with this particular one. And I don't know if other ordinances are like that. It's like their decision in their mind, this is okay. And then it's just up to the individual opinions of the planning board. So it's very subjective.
well, I think also when people are unhappy with decisions that are being made at the planning board level, they do reach out to the council. April can probably attest to that.
Yeah.
And also the town manager. And I know, there have been instances in the past where, staff have been asked to, talk with the planning board members, and remind them kind of what their role and responsibility is, and that it's really looking at the town ordinances and making sure that they're being applied consistently and appropriately. Because oftentimes they do need to separate their own personal opinions and what they want to see happen from what is in front of them, because they are bound by, what the town ordinance says that can or cannot happen on, land in the different areas of town.
Thank you.
I understand where you're going. I'm not sure that there's a lot we can do. Even if we tighten up the language, we may wind up in a situation like we saw last meeting, where it really causes significant harm and damage to somebody else,
I actually think this gives the planning board a little bit more, say in what they can't do. It's like saying, no, removal of mature trees is discouraged and the
It's discouraged.
imposition of mitigation measures or restrictions on tree clearing shall be prescribed by the planning board in order to prevent habitat fragmentation of existing forested landscapes and to protect hydrological ravines and other essential eco functions. So it's saying that the planning board, in order to prevent this, has the right to say no. And I think that's pretty powerful. If the applicant comes in and says, we're gonna do this and this, no, it's right here in the language. We have an order to prevent that habitat fragmentation. So I think that actually is a plus. And there's a lot of people that on the planning board right now that like buffering and like forest and those kind of things. So I really don't see where this is going to, down the road, handcuff the planning board to keep things from coming, or even handcuff the planning department from telling applicants, if you're gonna go to the board, they're gonna say, you gotta prove that you're not going to, defragment the forest.
Well, we started to, you're starting to get us, weren't the past meeting, weren't we starting to edge over, talk about maybe tree cutting policy or ordinance or something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's on the agenda to discuss coming up, a joint meeting with Conservation Commission to talk about that and a few other possible joint initiatives. Deb has her hand up.
Go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, the other thing I just remembered is that we have Rick on the planning board right now, and that was not an accident. That there was conversation in this committee about the planning board and making sure that we had connections between this committee and the planning board. And so that's something that we from this committee can continue to monitor. So.
The reason why I bring up the tree cutting thing is because I think that seems to be a good venue for your concerns as well, Ernie. Because we worry about tree cutting, but there's a lot of tree cutting that goes on.
Too much, I think.
Yeah.
Should drive through my neighborhood. It's terrible. They leveled way too many trees, but there's
When you
nothing to
say
do.
they.
Chamberlain,
These are developers.
developers, yeah. I think they should have left a lot more trees. but-
Well, you can't look at them as developers, you have to look at them as landowners. And it's their land.
Right, but that's why we do ordinances.
Right.
Citizens have a right to, dictate some things too. We don't,
Well, they're temporary, Chamberlain is a temporary landowner
yeah,
in your neighborhood.
yeah. But anyway,
What do you need from the committee?
I think we need an approval of the revised language so that we can bring it to the ordinance committee.
Well, I'll take the liberty of putting the motion on the table that we accept the revisions to this utility grade solar ordinance and as outlined in the narrative here.
A second.
Any further discussion?
I think we should get going. That's my bottom line. I think we should get going and do something. So let's do something.
All right, so we'll do a roll call vote. I'll start with those on Zoom. Deb McDonough,
Yes.
Ron Allen,
Yes.
Ernie Milner,
yes,
Rick Montein,
Yes.
David Kirstein,
Yes,
Anton Goder.
yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. I think this helps, but doesn't hurt. My opinion. Moving on to the next agenda item.
Yeah, EV charging, I keep hounding Jay about this, and he has told me that he will get to it before he leaves, which is,
He promised me to,
yeah, which is next week. So,
I know where his office is.
yeah, for a few more days, that'll be his office. You can find him in there. hopefully. So in the chance that that doesn't happen, Angela and I have been talking about possible options for how we can still get this to move forward before Jay's replacement is found and starts. So it may mean that we reach out to a consulting planner to come in and work with us specifically on this ordinance so that we can continue to move it forward. And unfortunately, I don't have any information on Jay's review at this point, but he has told me he will get to it, so we'll see what the status of
Well,
that
his
is.
last day is when, next week.
Technically, it's the 3rd, but I'm not sure since next week is a short week and all of that.
He's probably not doing anything over Memorial Day, so he can get to it.
Yeah, he can make this a priority during the long weekend.
What's the mechanism for this group to just express the sense of the committee that we'd like to see this move on expeditiously as possible? I know people are working on it, but there is parking lot work being done, and
There sure is.
we have no.
I can tell you, I've talked to a couple of counselors and they really, number one, they really appreciated the workshop we did with them. They thought it was very helpful and insightful. And given that, as soon as we can get it to the ordinance, I don't think you're gonna see where this is gonna get roadblocked much. I think as we work through this process, we have brought them along and tried to keep them in the loop. And I think, number one, they appreciate that. Number two, while they don't have the expertise, they have come to the conclusion that there has been some expertise and some outside influence here. So they're coming along nicely, I would say. And so I don't see where we have a long-term delay here. It's just a matter of getting that first draft out there so it can be tweaked as needed and then march through.
And I will say, Chair Clucci did provide, when we were talking about pulling together the workshop, he asked to see the draft language. It was provided to him and he had a number of comments specifically on kind of formatting and fitting it into our existing ordinance. So we have his feedback and what he's specifically looking for on, the off chance that Jay isn't able to kind of move this forward before he leaves. We at least have some good feedback from the chair of the council that we can provide to, whoever may be coming in to pick up where Jay left off. So
And remind me, who's on the ordinance?
right now it's Jean Marie Katerina, Don Hamill, and John Clucci.
John, okay, the chair.
Yeah.
So having the chair on that ordinance committee is helpful too. Well, that's good. Just remember, we only have one council meeting a month now through the summer. So their agenda is gonna be packed to try to get the most in.
Yeah.
But of course, there's a lot of, on the council side, they don't wanna rush a lot of things because there's a new counselor that is coming on and then we have elections. And so they don't wanna cripple future composition.
So,
I have to leave shortly. So
Yeah,
can we go to new business now?
yes. Joint meeting with Conservation Commission, this is kind of what we alluded to a bit ago, where we talked about having a meeting with them to talk about, initially we are calling it a tree ordinance. At the end of last meeting, we kind of evolved that into a habitat alteration ordinance. So we're talking about more than just tree cutting. But there may be other opportunities to work with the Conservation Commission as well. And Rick, you met with April and Randy Hogan, the chair.
Right.
Do you want to share?
Sure, I'll share, and if I leave in April, feel free. You were involved in that and really appreciated your time, and it was nice to chat with Randy, but we talked about the joint meeting for the purpose that Jamie said, but also to take a look at, is there something we can provide the council in terms of, from our standpoint, from our committee standpoint, what would be important for us if there was going to be any sort of discussion with the Downs and the GMO, the Growth Management Ordinance? And we, at the time we were talking, I was talking with April and Randy, it was, are there some things that the town could make the developer do as a waiver is granted? It's up to them whether they want to grant them a full waiver or stipulate a waiver with conditions and those kind of things. Well, we want to put something in the laps of the town councilors from where we stand as to why it's important. If they're going to approve a waiver, it's going to increase the build out. And we feel like maybe there's some things that should go in before we can catch up with all the ordinances that need to happen in order to stay true to our town comprehensive plan. That was the gist of the conversation. And I think what we want to do with the joint meeting is talk about what does that mean and what does that look like and what could those elements be? It's just a brainstorm session at this point. April was a savior, so to speak. I thought this growth, the waiver request was going to be moving quickly. It doesn't look like they're going to move that quickly for reasons I just said earlier. They have a new counselor coming on that needs to be brought up to speed, and we have an election with potential new counselors coming on. And they don't want to do anything on a GMO waiver until they have the new full body of the council. So that kind of bought us a little bit of time. And that's why we said, well, maybe this joint meeting would be a great first step in trying to put our thoughts together and then go off in our own little committees and try to rework and prioritize things and, come up with recommendations that we could offer the town council. Is that fair, April?
Yeah, last night at the Building Steering Committee meeting, Tom Hall mentioned that there might be something ready for public view in terms of the Downs exemption within the next 2 weeks. But again, that would just kind of be the council's first look at it and the first opportunity to present the contract language to the public. But I still anticipate a lot of public process and a lot of opportunities for the public to weigh in on exactly what the language means. And so I think that this joint brainstorming, if that's what it starts out as, is still within that timeline.
So we are proposing a joint meeting with Conservation Commission at their next regular scheduled meeting, which would be June 13th at 6 p.m. the Monday.
June 13th, that's fine.
Does the committee feel like,
It's unfortunate. I'd love to be there. I'm going to be out of town the 13th, 14th. But,
Too bad.
I really
I'm
like
saying it's a
it.
brainstorm, we'll bring
Yeah.
back stuff. And-
Yeah,
and-
great.
and provide
Yeah, I really am. Yeah,
opportunities
I know.
for
It's okay.
digging in a little bit.
And I would say if you want to provide any kind of comments ahead of time or thoughts ahead of time.
Oh, okay,
that we
great.
can bring forward as part of that meeting, I
Yeah.
think that would be great. And
Great.
again, I think that this will likely focus on the Downs waiver, just because that is the most immediate thing happening. But I see us kind of having other conversations with the Conservation Commission about habitat and tree cutting and things like that
Yeah,
moving
good.
forward.
Good.
I don't see this being a one and done opportunity with the
great.
Conservation Commission.
I personally, I'd also like to see how this backs out into the comprehensive plan. I mean, we collective town, council, everyone, spent years putting that comprehensive plan together.
Yeah.
And I need to go back and revisit the comprehensive plan just to see how it redounds to this GMO, and waivers. I mean, why do you have a plan when you're not going to stand up to some of the core tenets of it. I know that these are living documents, circumstances change, but plan was just concluded, what, how long ago? 2 years ago?
It was approved last summer by the
Yeah.
council.
You know, and then all of a sudden, it's like, take it all on, throw it the hell out the window.
Bring that passion with you.
Well,
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you all. Sorry I gotta leave. My real job calls me.
So if everyone is amenable, we will plan to meet with Conservation Commission on the 13th. The meetings are typically here or via Zoom, so I'll include this group in the meeting materials that go out, and I think that that will probably serve as our June meeting for sustainability as well.
yeah, the meeting would be here.
Somewhere in town. Room to be determined based on what else is happening. I don't think that's a planning board night, so
No, it's not. I just looked.
we should be
Yeah,
able to
yeah, and I just
have
put it on my
one of your
calendar.
chambers.
Take care, everybody. Bye, virtual world.
Thanks, Rick. All right, the next item is Counselor Corner Live. So April, if you don't mind sharing the exciting news with everyone here.
Yeah, so my suggestion to do the next Counselor Corner Live on sustainability and conservation in Scarborough was approved by the council last meeting. And so everyone can put that on their calendar officially for June 16th, which is a Thursday. And I think we'll start at 6. I think that's what we said. It might be 6:30. I can follow up with that. But if you weren't able to attend the Counselor Corner Live on growth, the basic format is that Counselor Anderson and I open up chambers and we make ourselves available to the public. We don't bring an agenda. And so the people in the room really dictate where the conversation goes, and they have an opportunity to tell council what they want to talk about in terms of issues related to the topic. And so I'm hoping that that generates a lot of interest, both within the committees that I'm liaison to, but also within the greater community, because when Jamie did the workshop, when we were preparing for the application a while back, that generated a lot of interest. And so I'm hoping, that excitement in talking about environmental issues will carry over, and it'll just be a good opportunity for people to talk directly with council about what they think our priorities should be.
So I'll be pulling together kind of an overview of some of the initiatives that the town has done in the past and what we're currently working on, so that Councillor Seiger and Anderson will have that information. I will be there as well for questions, and I believe committee members are being invited to attend to participate and give perspective from the committees as well. And that's usually hybrid, right, April? So they can participate
Yep,
in person.
Yeah, it will be hybrid again. And again, it's just a big round table. So, and we try, and monitor it the best we can, that everybody gets to speak, but bring whatever you want council or councilors to hear. And hopefully it'll be a good discussion.
And I would say that committee members can participate both on behalf of the committee, but also just a Scarborough citizen who wants to provide input and feedback as part of the discussion also. Do we have any thoughts? Do people have anything specific that you want to make sure that I touch on when I'm pulling together the information for the counselors? Y'all trust me? All right, great. Well, hopefully some or all of you are able to join us in some form on the 16th for part of that discussion. We can move on to updates. April, do you have anything else to share from town council?
The only other thing I would say from town council is on my other committee, the building steering committee for the school, which I am also the liaison to, they are, Jamie sent out an email requesting applicants who were interested in being on the sustainability committee, the subcommittee for the building committee. And that did generate a couple of applicants. So thank you if you did apply. If you're interested in applying, I'm sure Jamie would be happy to resend those links. And that's just an open application. There's no deadline to apply right now. And so if you're considering being on the school building committee, you know, you can just get your application in at your convenience. But the expertise is invaluable to us. So I'm grateful for anybody who's willing to serve on yet another committee. And if you if you know somebody who isn't already on one of our town committees who you think would be interested, you know, please by all means forward the information along to them too.
I wish Rick hadn't left before we got to the planning board. I know Costco's coming up for a resubmission in the next couple of weeks. And there is a large development being proposed at the intersection of Gorham Road and Mussey Road. And it looks like they're working with the land trust to put a large portion of that property into conservation. I just received some information. Have been out for the past couple days, so I haven't been able to fully check my email, but I do know that there's some information in there about the developer working with Scarborough Land Trust. And they are going through a kind of a site plan development process with the planning board, which is a more extensive process because of the scale of development. And they did share with planning board that they are planning to either formally conserve that land through the land trust or leave it alone. It is adjacent to the Nonsuch River. There are extensive wetlands back there. So it'll be a good parcel to leave undisturbed, or a good portion of that parcel to leave undisturbed. So that's kind of all I know about planning board at this point. And then Conservation Commission, they are very much looking at ways to increase the amount of land conserved in Scarborough. They're very interested in meeting with this group to talk about habitat ordinances and to talk about possible ideas for the Downs GMO waiver, and provide some thoughts and feedback to the council on elements that should be required as part of that. So including, you know, EV chargers, solar ready, landscaping with native plants, leaving areas conserved, open, undisturbed, things like that process.
Which reminds me about this joint meeting. Maybe you could invite Andrew Mackey from the Land Trust to be at the meeting if he's free.
Sure. Yep. He has been coming to our to the Conservation Commission meetings. We were hoping to have
Okay.
him.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was,
Yeah.
because historically he didn't participate in those. So
Yeah.
I didn't know.
So there is a bit more of a land conservation push on behalf of the Conservation Commission. So trying to engage the land trust as much as possible so that the Conservation Commission has an understanding of what they're doing and how the commission might support or reinforce the work.
Yeah, I think that's
of
a
the land
great
trust.
idea.
We were hoping to do a meeting that does focus on Scarborough Land Trust and kind of where their priorities are, their priority areas and their priority efforts. I think that this joint meeting is going to kind of push that down the line a little bit, but it would be good to have Andrew there also to provide some input and feedback for that discussion. So we'll make sure that he is invited to that meeting also.
Back to the Costco situation. Do we remember like what the numbers were of EV charging stations, what we were requesting?
I believe it's a moving target at this point.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what the most recent submission is. I know that staff have been talking with them about EV charging. I think that what they proposed initially and what they're coming back at are going to be different.
Yeah. Oh,
Good different or bad different?
Not good different. So, yeah, and they are requesting 800 parking spaces. So, all the more reason to move our ordinance, get our ordinance moving forward. I don't think we were ever going to meet Costco's timeline and have our ordinance in place, we were never going to get it there, in order to have it apply to Costco. But it'll be a good example for why we need to have our ordinance in place. It is going to be a poster child, I think, for why we want developers to at least be considering, and planning for the future during development.
Otherwise, they're just gonna have to do a ton of retrofit.
Yeah, and it'll end up costing them 4 times as much, at least. Based on the data, it's 4 times more expensive to retrofit a parking lot for EV charging.
Do you have access to a recent submission from Costco, the big picture?
Yeah.
Could you send something?
I believe I can. I will double check and see if I can share the site plan.
Just
with you.
conversationally, when Linda and I were away, a week or so ago, we pulled off the highway in Virginia to get something to eat, and it happened to be at a Costco place with traffic at the gas pumps. At Costco was just outrageous.
Yeah,
And I have no idea what the layout is here.
yeah, that is something that the planning board, I know, is looking at very closely, is the location of their gas pumps, because they do anticipate that they will be highly used and don't want that interfering with the flow of traffic on Payne Road or any of the other roads that are leading into Costco. So, but yeah, I'll see if I can share the overall site plan
That'd be nice.
with you all. So I guess is what we have for this meeting. I will ask Will if you have any public comment or anything that you want to share since you made the effort to come to our meeting today.
Yeah, so I'm here to get basic interest on electric school buses. Basically, my colleague is the board chair for a organization called CTE, the Center for Transportation and the Environment, largest nonprofit in the country working towards sustainable zero emission transportation. I wasn't on this project, and I'm still starting to get involved with this organization myself, but the 6 transit buses that came to Saco, OOB, Portland, that whole project was managed by CTE. And, so far, my colleague and I have been kind of inactively involved. He's the board chair and he's done a lot of oversight, but not a lot of direct involvement. And we see a pretty good opportunity to help move our area forward by working on school buses. They're a really great target for conversion, and they go regular routes. They sit for long periods of time. So we just want to drum some interest. I went to the school board meeting. I'm starting to get a lay of the land here as to how Scarborough manages their current fleet and what rate that they're replacing that and what the budget's like. And we think we can definitely be helpful. And we just wanted to see where everybody was at and what the process and the planning was. We've also talked with the state DOT and the state DOE, and there is some tentative legislation going in to encourage districts to convert to zero emission buses by like 2035. So things are moving forward, and we just want to make sure that we can help move this along.
What is the cost differential between a regular school bus and an electric school bus?
Right now, it's about 3 to 1, which is the biggest downside. But
Electric school bus is 3 times more expensive than a regular.
to what I know, yes. And I can get you more specific information. And that's the biggest downside right now, is because it's such an early stage in the market, the cost parity isn't there yet. But when you look at operational costs and you look at lifetime ownership costs, that's where it ends up paying out. Right now, there is I don't know a lot about this information. I'm talking,
Yeah, because I could
Cool.
ask you a million questions
Right.
about school buses.
Right,
You
and-
know, I mean,
and I'm happy to get that information for you and get those answers for you, but I don't have them all prepared. But one of the EPA has put out some money, as a form of reimbursement. So basically, the way that I understand it is when, somebody orders an electric school bus, there is money, federal money available to reimburse part of that order, to help bring those buses closer to the cost parity of gas buses.
April, who's responsible for school buses in Scarborough?
I mean, the school board sets the budget and the school department has their own transportation department that brings forward requests, just like the town has its, public works department. So this would all be on the school side of the house in terms of budgeting and making those kinds of decisions. The role that I could see potentially town committees having would be discussion about ordinances. And, if we created initiatives on the town side that the school had to follow, that would be one way that we could influence their decision-making there.
But they make their own decision about what they buy and everything else.
Always, yep.
And I just want to share also that there would be some needs. I mean, obviously, we would need the charging infrastructure at the bus garage. The other huge need that I would see as part of this process is that our public works maintains all of our entire school bus fleet. So they would need some significant training on how to maintain an electric bus, because we currently have a couple electric vehicles, town-owned electric vehicles. And there's a huge need there for them just to understand what they should be doing to maintain our electric vehicles. So I think that for a lot of departments, a lot of towns, that is going to be one of the first major barriers, in addition to cost, is making sure that they can maintain that new technology.
Yeah, and to comment on that, what CTE does is manage all of that. They have been doing this for, I think, almost 20 years. And, countless projects where they've done training, they've done helping with the charging planning infrastructure. And then they do studies and follow-ups. So they're looking at you for 1 year and 5 years and 10 years and seeing what went right, what went wrong, how can we do this better for everybody else? What I think everybody, from what I understand, is most interested in is piloting, complete cold turkey cut transition. They want something big that they can demonstrate as this is how it's done, so that other districts and towns, not only in the state, but in the country, can look at an example of somebody who's done this. I agree that training and charging infrastructure are a huge piece of that. One of the municipalities in Massachusetts they have hired out to a company who they own the fleet, they maintain the fleet, and pay some kind of subscription fee. And I think that pay per use model is also something that is kind of new to the market. And most of their revenue actually comes from vehicle to grid. So they operate on charging the buses when they're needed and then discharging the buses during peak hours when the buses are just sitting, because they're effectively energy storage devices. I agree, that's a huge barrier, but that is something that, people are prepared to help with.
Deb, you have your hand up?
I do, because one of the things, this committee has certainly interfaced with the school board, and not very effectively, but in conversations about solar for the schools. And so is there a mechanism or a way for this committee to provide information to the school board, or to review this information with the school board, or to engage the conversation in some way, just to offer our services in evaluating this kind of proposal. Similar to what I did with the library, that was not directly a sustainability committee initiative, but I worked with the library board as they were evaluating their solar proposals, just because when they're hearing only from the installers or the sellers or the people representing the equipment, that can feel uneasy. And so having an in-town group with some familiarity to look through that could be valuable.
Yeah, I think I would look to April for some feedback on that process. I think we can certainly reach out to the school department to let them know that the committee is available to support their decision-making process, if that would be helpful. Beyond that, April, do you have thoughts on?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, in terms of draw from my own experience on the school board, which is the school board doesn't have nearly the same level of committee engagement that the town side does. And so most, if not all, of the initiatives come from staff. And so really the only way that something like this would come before the school board is if, the staff brought it forward to the school board for consideration, and that would probably come through the superintendent even. That being said, there's absolutely nothing that says you can't request an audience with the school board. You could request to be an agenda item. If this organization, for example, was going to request to be an agenda item, then Deb, I would absolutely, follow up with the school board and say, members of this committee would be happy to be there as support, something along those lines. And even if this committee wanted to meet with the school board, just like you did with town council, you could go through the school board chair to request a workshop or to be an agenda item.
And so I would seriously like to follow up on this, because I think there's some real value to being early, in that there are some funds available from the outside. That yes, the initial startup costs may be higher, but a lot of those costs can be defrayed, sometimes to the point of lower costs than the next round of folks as costs come down. So I didn't catch the name of the visitor today, but if we could be pointed toward more information and overview of who's looking for what and what opportunities are available, because I quite frankly don't have full notes on what you just said, that could be really useful for us to go through.
And I know there are members of the Conservation Commission who have just recently reached out to the school department, superintendent, and the school board because there was a recent article in the Press Herald about Boston starting to transfer or transition their school bus fleet to electric. And there is infrastructure money available to help with that process. So it would be a good time to start thinking about this. It is too bad that we are just through our budget process, so that we can't kind of work that into necessarily into this fiscal year, but there may be ways to get creative if there is other money available to offset.
Sinking fund. Come on, council, we need a sinking fund.
Yeah, I have a meeting this afternoon with Assistant Superintendent Nadeau.
Great.
And I guess where I'm at personally, and this is not an overnight process. There's, as you said, a lot of details to think about. There's a lot of work that has to go into making this process happen. But I would 100% agree that there's no time like the present to start moving this process along. And that's where I'm at is we got to start. We got to get people interested in this and start looking at some of these details now, so that we can be ready moving forward when this technology is available. And there is a lot of both public and private funding available for these kinds of initiatives. It's from the overviews that I've done so far, the people that I've talked to so far, the money isn't necessarily the issue, it's the logistics, it's the planning, it's the getting everybody on board and deciding with what to do and whatnot. So,
I anticipate both will be a challenge in Scarborough.
Yeah.
Can I ask, Will, is there other types of public vehicles that you look at, or just school buses? So, you know, police cars or EMT?
I don't know the answer to that, but I'm certain that we're equipped to help with, you know, all kinds of infrastructure.
And Jamie, you said there's a couple electric cars, and do you know what types or?
We have Nissan Leafs. The planning department has two. They're older, they're, you know, the range is about 80 miles, but they're
Wow.
sufficient for, like our code office has use of one, and then our planning office has use of one. And so it's sufficient for, you know, doing our site visits around town and things like that.
How's it going? If people choose to use them?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so we have a code officer who is assigned, like each code officer has a vehicle assigned to them. And so one code officer, that's his dedicated vehicle. And the other one is shared between the kind of our planning, engineer, and sustainability. And yeah, we use it quite frequently. Drive in, plug it in, and it's ready for the next time to go around town. We can't unfortunately take it, you know, if we have a meeting in Augusta, we can't take the EV. It's not gonna get us there and back, but for around town, it's fine. And I say it can't get us there because they're the older models. Newer, if we upgraded, we would be able to
Mhm.
have much better range. So, and I think having cold weather case studies, since I know Mount Desert Island just got an electric school bus, so having some cold weather case studies to draw on will be helpful, since there is, I mean, battery life is not great in the winter. I know that there are communities that are still able to make it happen in Minnesota, New York, and things like that. So
Yeah, as
having
long
that
as-
information available.
As long as there's sufficient battery, then that winter degradation can leave a battery that's still sufficient, as long as you're planning for that.
Right.
I mean, we just put 100,000 miles on our Leaf. We drive in the winter a lot. We have an older one as well. We know what its range is. And so those buses could clearly be purchased and designed to do what they need to do in the winter months.
Batteries are much better now than they were when the town purchased the leads that we currently have, so.
Yeah, I would anticipate, geographically, Scarborough's really big. And so I guarantee you're going to field questions about whether or not these buses can meet our needs just driving our regular bus routes. But then the very next thing that people are going to ask is, what about getting kids to sporting events? What about getting kids to field trips? So, I'm sure that those are the same questions that every community asks, but I would anticipate those coming up too.
One thing that's worth sharing for you guys is part of the school board's budget for this year is actually purchasing route planning software and bus tracking software. So it sounds like you all are going to be in a good position to know what your needs are. And I think that that's a really important piece of all of this is, how I personally purchased an EV about 6 months ago, and I'm in the same boat where I've got about an 80-mile range. And the reality is it meets all my needs, pretty much every single one. I hardly ever go, and when I say hardly ever, I predictably only go further than that, probably about once every 3 months. I think you all are in a unique position in that front to be able to identify what your needs really are and how far these buses are actually going and what routes they're going to be able to take, and be, in a good position to adapt that and to get your needs suited.
Ron, your hand is up first.
Yeah, I have a question. Has anybody done any studying on the charging requirements for these buses, as in they're all used, or most of them are used at the same time, and their charging requirements will therefore be at the same time? How much is that going to take to get done efficiently.
So, it takes some planning to figure all that out, because you're right, you know, when you've got a fleet of, I think we've got 24 or 30 buses, plugging them in all at the same time is a potential strain on the grid. And so there has to be work with grid operators and infrastructure on the level of, you know, service. You can't just plug in a bunch of buses and hope to charge them all at the same time. And part of what's evolving out of that is, you know, charging and discharging them more systematically, and, you know, charging 8 of them quickly and then 8 more of them quickly, and kind of spreading that load out. And there is also some talk about on-site energy storage, and, you know, that's another route for when we talk about sustainability in terms of batteries. Maybe the battery isn't good enough for driving down the road, but it is good enough to act as a stationary energy storage device, and potentially supplementing the grid supply with on-site supply from solar panels or other, like hydrogen, for instance. So those are all moving pieces that need to be planned for, and it's something that we can do and people can do. When I say we, the Imperial we, you know, it's something that the transit fleets have proven is possible and are actively working out what needs to be done in order to make that a sustainable process.
Deb? You're.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that that's precisely the sort of software solutions that the revision consultant was talking about in the context of multifamily houses. And particularly when you look at the grid stabilization efforts, like the ideas that you can feed electricity back into the grid. So that's something that the school department has really done a lot of work with, is identifying their peak load times and turning their generators on to be able to avoid those peak load, to adjust those peak load costs for a large energy user. And so this really feeds into the work that they are already doing. Those peak load times happen during the summer, having the size of a bank of batteries that they could use in place of a low efficiency generator. When the bus load uses are off, there's a lot of ways that this could really play into energy management with the school system. That charging can be done predominantly during the daytime, during those down hours. So solar's a really, really good fit. And so I'm really glad somebody's coming forward with this as a concept, and would encourage you. I mean, I guess, is it the will of this committee? Could we pass along that offer to help to review materials to the school department? I would like for us to offer that.
Yeah, I think we can just let them know that we're available to support in their decision-making process, however they might, in whatever support they may need, and letting them know that there are folks in town with the time and the expertise, or time and the knowledge to.
I would phrase that even more affirmatively, that we would like to be a part of evaluating this information, because there's a tendency on the part of bureaucratic organizations to function in a very, very conservative kind of way. Let's wait until everybody else has done this first, and so that's where this committee has been able to work with town council and town staff to help provide that sort of background analysis in ways that can be difficult to do otherwise. We could be the cold weather case study, for example. If the money is there to help us to manage that, we may not need to wait for the cold weather case study. I mean, some of that's already happening. But we have the committee resources to help evaluate those options.
Sure. Anything else on this topic? Will, do you have a card with you?
Yeah.
You want to just leave that with me? I may touch base with you, and see kind of how the meeting went, and I'll plan to follow up with the, assistant superintendent, and let them know that this committee would like to be part of that, review process.
Yeah, and you know, if there's anything, if there are lots of questions that I don't feel like I answered adequately, but if you can send me a list of
Yeah.
what questions you all have, as a general thing, we can just start this conversation, and get the answers to those questions. I'm personally, you know, brand new, so I'm, still trying to figure out how all this stuff works, but I am eager to help in any way that I can. And I'm passionate about helping in whatever capacity that is necessary.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time to come and educate us a little bit more about, electric buses. And I think this committee would be pretty excited to see, some or all of Scarborough's buses, electric in the future. So, definitely would be engaged in that process. Right. Anyone else have anything before we wrap it up? So as a reminder, our next meeting will be on Monday evening, June 13th at 6 o'clock. So I will adjust the meeting schedule, in the calendar invite that's kind of the placeholder, and you all will receive the information that goes out, with the Conservation Commission's, next meeting. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie. Bye, guys.